Hello everyone. So today I will be talking about CRT televisions and monitors. So before I start, I'll explain to you how a cathode ray tube works. So in a very basic way. So a cathode ray tube has three main parts to it. The first one is the Electron Gun Assembly, which you see right here. And the next part is deflection plates. And the last part of it is the phosphor coated screen, which is what you see basically. So let's talk about the electron gun assembly first and the parts that are on it. So the first thing you have is the cathode. You have basically the control grid, and you have the focusing anodes and accelerating anodes. So where the beam goes first, the beams are generated here in the cathodes. When the cathode is heated, that emits electrons, right? And then it goes to the control grid where voltages, negative voltages applied to it, and this could increase the intensity of the beam or decrease it, change the intensity basically, and it helps to repel the electrons. So negative charge is added, and that repels electrons and sends it into a narrow beam towards the control grid. In the control grid, there's a small hole in the center of it, which corresponds to the axis of the screen. So the beam has to go to the center of the screen to be split up, right? So basically it goes to the center, to the control grid, negative charge is added, and then that helps to repel the electrons, and then forms a narrow beam, and then the narrow beam now goes into the focusing anode and the accelerating anode. So the focusing anode, it helps to focus the beam, and then the accelerating anode helps to accelerate the beam. So a positive charge is added. That's why it's called an anode. And a positive voltage is added. This could be increased or decreased, and change the intensity of the beam as well. And it helps to focus it, and it accelerates the beam, basically makes it go faster. So acceleration is a change in velocity. It's an increase in the change of velocity. So basically, let's say a car is moving at 45 miles an hour, and then it accelerates to 50 miles an hour. So the change in velocity is 55 miles an hour, right? From 45 to 50 miles an hour. So accelerated by 5 miles an hour. So that's an acceleration. That's what it means. So the beam is accelerated, speeds up, goes to the deflection plates. So you have a vertical deflection plate, which is corresponded to the y-axis right here, and you have the horizontal deflection plates, which is deflected by the x-axis. And then this corresponds to this graph right here, this thing. So when the beam goes this way, let's say it's focused like scanning up, right? So then this thing would go up, and this will be represented on the graph. So let's say now the beam goes from here to here, all the way back here, down here, then it would be going down on the horizontal axis, as you can see. So this is kind of like a graph that you would see in like algebra class or something. And this is done at a very high frequency of 60 to 80 hertz. So 60 to 80 times per second. This is going up and down very fast, and this helps to produce a picture on the screen. So when this beam of electron hits, that's electrical energy, and that's converted to light energy, which you can see on the screen. So obviously you can't see electrons, but you can see light. But the phosphor coated helps to convert that electrical energy to light energy, and you can see that. So that's how it works basically. So now I'll be talking about CRT screens and why they're still good for various applications. Okay, now I'll be talking about why CRT monitors and televisions are better for retro gaming. So it's better because a CRT monitor was formatted for retro gaming, and that the aspect ratio is about 4:3 for CRT televisions. For LCD and OLED monitors, the aspect ratio is about, I think, 16:10 to 16:9. That'd be for like 720p and 1080p basically. And this is not what retro gaming consoles had back then. And in addition to that, when you look at a LCD screen close up, for, let's say, if you're running a game like Ghosts and Goblins or something, if you saw that close up for an LCD screen, it would look quite pixelated because of the fact that LCD screens are very sharp, right? And CRT screens had a little blur to it. So when you look at the original Ghosts and Goblins, you would see some blur, and that blur would kind of like get rid of the pixelated stuff on the screen, and it would make it blend in better basically when you look at it close up. And that's one of the reasons why it's better to play retro games on the original hardware, like the monitor, when the monitors are concerned. And you could basically, and another difference between CRT and LCD screens is that well, one of the problems with the CRT screens is the size of it. Not only is it's bigger, in terms of like volume, because for LCD and first LCD screen and a CRT screen, if you look at the screen size, it'd be about the same area. However, the problem is that a CRT screen is longer, and that you have that cathode ray tube, right, which makes it heavier and longer. So it's going to be quite kind of awkward to put that in a place where you put a LCD screen, because if you put an LCD screen in a place, then you could move the LCD screen further back against a desk, right? And that would enable you to have more space. But for a CRT screen, you can't do that because it's longer. It's got more volume. But another thing good about CRT screens is that there are no dead pixels, and almost no dead pixels, because actually there's no such thing as a dead pixel, because many issues can, because of the way the cathode ray tube works, there are no dead pixels. The weight is definitely an issue with CRT monitors. I mean, if you had a 17-inch screen, I think it would weigh as much as maybe 40 to 60 pounds. I'm not really sure, but maybe 40 to 50 pounds. And for a similar LCD screen would probably weigh 8 to 11 pounds. So LCD screens are definitely lighter. And as for availability, CRT screens are still widely available. You could go to a place like eBay and you could find a lot of used CRTs for very little money. But the only problem is that when you order one, the price of the LCD monitor or screen or television will be cheap. However, the shipping will be very expensive because it's a bulk item. It's heavy. But as for the quality, I guess like I was talking about earlier about the blurring stuff, that's what kind of like gave definition to retro gaming back in the day, and that is something that I don't I don't want changed. It basically, despite the flaws, like how you had the lower resolutions. The lower resolutions were kind of like compensated by the blurring of the screens, and that was something that was part of the retro gaming experience. And cathode ray tube, for the most part, were kind of like curved. They weren't really flat because of the way that the CRT tube worked. They were kind of like curved. They weren't like flat like the television, like the LCD TVs that you have now. Definitely, I kind of like missed that in a way. And basically, for games, for getting the correct resolutions and stuff like that. So if you run a Nintendo emulator like Nestopia or something, the real resolution for the NES, Nintendo Entertainment System, was 256 by 224 pixels. But on an emulator, you're going to get 256 by 240. Those are like subtile differences. And plus, the image on the LCD screen is going to be very crisp and sharp. And that leads to a lot of pixel problems. However, there are like filtering schemes you could use on an emulator to like make the LCD screen more like a CRT screen, but it's still not the same. You know, it would rather be playing it on a CRT screen. As for the interfaces for these old retro type of video game consoles, was I think they had component, composite, and S-video. So that's like different compared to what we have now, which is HDMI, DVI, and like I said, the aspect ratio isn't the same. The native aspect ratio for those older formats, like component and composite RGB, was 4:3, and the screen was built for it. So basically, that's why I want it. So I'm kind of like looking for a retro CRT television screen to play some of these retro games. But some people have tried to use like composite and component video jacks. They try to convert digital to analog, and the result was just simply awful by just using adapters, and that's not a good way to go. I think the better and simpler way would just be to find a CRT monitor. I think you could find them in garage sales, probably. If you check around your area, you may be able to find one for very little money. You know, people just want to get rid of them. You could say, would you take $10 for it? They would probably take $5 or $10 for it. So anyways, thanks for watching by Ace 1000 KS 1975. Signing out.